Donnie and Dolly. The team is supported by ableauctions.ca. Closing your business? We can help.
It is Tuesday, and all of our guests today, including Elliotte Friedman, are brought to you by the Waddling Dog Pub. One of Victoria's historic watering holes welcomes you to come see why they're the talk of the peninsula. Their 50-seat patio is set to open May 1st, and the return of no-cover UFC nights slotted to return in June, all while showing all the action of the upcoming NHL playoffs. Also, swing by their attached liquor store to pick up your Donnie and Dolly swag. There are countless reasons to come, sit, and stay at the Waddling Dog. We got Elliotte? Not yet? Okay. Let's do this. One of the subjects we were going to talk with Elliotte about is the Calgary Flames.
Oh, boy.
Missing the playoffs as they lose to Nashville in a shootout. And Daryl Sutter is taking a lot of heat for using Nick Ritchie and not Tyler Toffoli or Andrew Mangiapane in the shootout. Who's going to pay for that, Rick? Because Daryl Sutter, here's the strange part. All the talk about, well, they got to get rid of Sutter, who was an Adams Award winner last year.
Big time.
He has a contract extension that doesn't start until next season. Brad Treliving's contract is over with. So who would pay there, if anybody? Rick.
Well, look at the GM, Donnie. He's not been extended. Usually you extend those guys, and Elliotte and I talked about this a little while back. The GM's got no contract. The coach has got a contract. Who stays, who goes? It's going to be a fascinating offseason, Donnie. And they got a ton of UFAs, too, in Calgary coming up.
Brought to you by the Waddling Dog. Let's bring in Elliotte Friedman from Hockey Night in Canada and the 32 Thoughts podcast. Elliotte, thanks for doing this, sir. How are you?
If there's ever a guest that should be sponsored by something called the Waddling Dog, I am that
person. We'll get you there one day, Elliotte. Hey, Calgary, who pays for their lack of success this season, if anybody?
I think, if anything, like the one thing I've heard, guys, that the Flames have really talked about is that they had too many distractions this season. Yeah. And I think one of the things that's definitely going to happen there is they're going to talk about how can we limit that. How can we keep the focus onto what's going on the ice as opposed to what's going around the team or what's going on in the dressing room or, what's going on in the organization? The first thing is, and I heard you talk about Treliving, I believe he was offered a contract extension this year. I think they want him to stay, but I think the decision was just made to punt it until the end of the year. Well, now we're there. So I think we have to get to that question. I think the other thing that comes up is let's just take a look at the roster. You've got a bunch of really important players who are coming into the last season of their contracts, from Chris Tanev to Tyler Toffoli to Elias Lindholm to I believe Andrew Mangiapane has only one more year. I'd have to double check that one. But Noah Hannafin, there's a lot of players there. Good players, Michael Backlund, who have one more year left on their contracts. And I think the way that they feel about those players and the way that those players feel about staying in Calgary could be the biggest determining factor of how much everything changes.
Elliotte, the NBA playoffs start today, and it's obviously it's the play-in. Can you envision one day the NHL going to a play-in format?
I would love it, Don, but the commissioner hates it. He has been very open about the fact that he hates the idea. He thinks that right now it's very hard to make the NHL playoffs. Only half the teams get in. He really likes that. I remember last year, Don, in the East, Columbus and the Islanders were 9-10, and they were 20 points out. And I think that emboldened his stance. That I think he feels much stronger about that now that now that he's in a situation where he could point to that. I would love it. For example, we'd still have meaningful games involving Calgary and Nashville, potentially even more of them than we already do. The East is a great dogfight for those last two spots. Pittsburgh has control now, but we could have even more. And I would love it. I'm a big supporter of it. But there's one guy who's got a lot of power and a lot of votes, and he doesn't like it.
All right, Elliotte. You're one of the guys that gets Canucks Twitter on fire. The other guy that did it on the weekend.
Not like Bo Horvat.
That's just what I was going to ask you. What are your thoughts on what Bo Horvat had to say about Vancouver?
Yeah, like I got to tell you something, like stuff like that. I think people are way too sensitive. I really do. I don't think he had to apologize. I don't think he had to walk it back. Some people were tweeting at me, well, how would you like it if someone said that about Toronto? I was like, I've heard shots at Toronto all my life. Everybody hates Toronto. I mean, I covered the Raptors at a time where American players couldn't stand Toronto. Like I've heard it before. First of all, I think this, Rick and Don, he never thought that was going viral. He thought that was just going to be on in the rink, and he was praising the Islanders fans. And the next thing you know, he's like, "Oh my God, this everybody knows about this." But guys, like we always say, hockey players are boring. How many people are going to look at that and the reaction to that and say, "I'm not saying anything"? Like, someone doesn't like Vancouver. Well, a lot of people really love Vancouver. So I don't know. It's like maybe I'm wrong, but this stuff just doesn't bother me at all. And if someone said that about my city, I'd say, if that's the way you feel, that's the way you feel.
Elliotte, this Tanner Pearson injury is just getting worse. Can you tell us
Yeah.
from the NHLPA side what you know on how the NHLPA is handling that?
Well, I think this: if he can't play, I would expect a grievance.
Right.
He has another year under contract, but I think the question will become like, do we feel we get into a situation where Tanner Pearson lost a chance in another contract because of the way that this unfolded? And that's exactly where we're going to be. I mean, first, Rick, and you have to let the process run its way out. It has to be like I've heard the same concerns that you have, that there's an infection there that caused a lot of problems, and it's uncertain that Tanner Pearson will ever play again. So first we have to get to that point. Then we have to get to the next point of, okay, what does this mean? Is there a financial penalty that needs to be paid here? And if so, who's responsible for it? And, if he can't play, I expect we'll get to that. And the Canucks will have to defend themselves in the work of their doctors, or they'll go through a grievance, or the two sides will come to a settlement. But it'll come down to, is Tanner Pearson prevented of getting another contract because of the issue with the surgery? And I think we're kind of all expecting that process to go down at some point in time, but we have to get to the position first where he absolutely cannot play.
Claude Giroux was a milestone Monday in the National Hockey League. Claude Giroux, 1,000 points. Joe Pavelski, same thing. Erik Karlsson, 100 points as a defenseman. But Claude Giroux, not much playoff success in his career. Is he a Hall of Famer, Elliotte?
I think he is. I think I have a greater understanding now, especially in a sport like hockey, Don, how hard it is to win. Mm-hmm. When I was younger, Don, I was always one of those guys, if you don't win, you're a failure. And now that I've been around pro sports for 30 years, I see it's not only on one person. You need great teams to win. I think, to me, the Karlsson debate is really fascinating this year. There's a lot of people who don't think he should win the Norris.
Yep.
I look at it. If you look at the Sharks 5-on-5 with him off the ice versus him on the ice, it's very different. And the Sharks have been outscored 20-4 with empty nets when Karlsson's been on the ice. So minus 16 of his number is empty net goals against. So I think it's really hard in this day and age to get 100 points and not win the Norris Trophy. I look at Giroux. I think he's been a consistent player for a long time, a very consistent player for a long time. And I think that when you're the best player, you get more of the blame and more of the credit that you deserve. But I think there's also something to be said for hockey. If you don't have a great team, you're not going to win.
Eric DeHatchick brought up that maybe the NHL should have a Bobby Orr trophy for the best offensive defenseman. Would you be in favor of that?
You know what? I would. I think I'm probably in the minority there, Don. The one thing I really think is it's harder to defend now in the NHL than ever. Why is the scoring going up? Because the players are more skilled, but it's also because, you look guys, we grew up in an NHL where you had to have real courage to go to the front of the net. Because when you got there was going to be Darian Hatcher or Chris Pronger or someone like that to just carve you up. That doesn't happen anymore. And I think to be a really good defender, this day and age, a lot of defense is what Karlsson does, keeping the puck and scoring. But to be a real good, a guy like TJ Brody, a guy like Chris Tanev, Those guys could never win the Norris Trophy, but I think in this day and age, those guys are incredible players.
Yeah, I wonder if Pronger would even have won it in today's game because he was so much about defense, but he did score and set up people.
He was a great passer and he was a killer, and plus he made you notice him with one outrageous comment after another. It was awesome. I really miss having that guy around.
Yeah.
Elliotte, thanks for doing this. And I meant to say this to you. I've been meaning to say this to you for a few weeks. The woodwork on your ceiling is just amazing. Like
amazing.
Whoever the carpenter was, maybe it was you. I don't know who came up with that.
I can assure you it was not me. If it was me, it would be falling behind me like master streets.
We'd be seeing sky right now. Anyway,
thank you, Don. I appreciate it.
No problem. Elliotte, better late than never. Thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Sorry, guys. I had some other
problem.
work. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it.
You're a busy man. Thank you, Elliotte. Appreciate it.